Hello viewers, welcome to my channel Online Biology Tutorials. In this live of today, I will be reading line by line from NCERT for chapter number 13, taken from NCERT of class 12 biology, and the name of the chapter is going to be Biodiversity and Conservation. In case you are interested in hearing the audio of first 12 chapters, they are already uploaded in the same playlist. Such type of audio revisions helps you a lot because it will let you know that whether you are done with your chapter. If you are able to understand each word, each line, that means you are done with the chapter. But in case you find some lines as new and you are not able to comprehend or understand, that means still you need to devote some more time in understanding that part. Such type of revisions will certainly help you in scoring good marks in CBSE board, NEET examination, and of course for CUET. Board. My voice is very much clear, so we can go ahead. So let's begin with the live reading of chapter number 13, Biodiversity and Conservation. If an alien from a distant galaxy were to visit our planet Earth, the first thing that would amaze and baffle him would most probably be the enormous diversity of life that he would encounter. Even for humans, the rich variety of living organisms with which they share this planet never ceases to astonish and fascinate us. The common man would find it hard to believe that there are more than 20,000 species of ants, 3 lakh species of beetles, 28,000 species of fishes, and nearly 20,000 species of orchids. Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have been trying to understand the significance of such diversity by asking important questions. Why are there so many species? Did such great diversity exist throughout Earth's history? How did this diversification come about? How and why is this diversity important to the biosphere? Would it function any differently if the diversity was much less? How do humans benefit from the diversity of life? First topic is biodiversity. In our biosphere, immense diversity exists not only at the species level but at all the levels of biological organization, ranging from macromolecules within cells to biomes. Biodiversity is the term popularized by sociobiologist Edward Wilson to describe combined diversity at all the levels of biological organization. The most important of them are genetic diversity. A single species might show high diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range. The genetic variation shown by the medicinal plant Rauwolfia vomitoria growing in different Himalayan ranges might be in terms of the potency and concentration of the active chemical reserpine that the plant produces. India has more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice, 1,000 varieties of mango. Species diversity. The diversity at the species level, for example, the Western Ghats have a greater amphibian species diversity than the Eastern Ghats. Ecological diversity. At the ecosystem level, India, for instance, with its deserts, rainforests, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries, and alpine meadows, has a greater ecosystem diversity than a Scandinavian country like Norway. It has taken millions of years of evolution to accumulate this rich diversity in nature, but we could lose all that wealth in less than 2 centuries if the present rates of species losses continue. Biodiversity and its conservation are now vital environmental issues of international concern as more and more people around the world begin to realize the critical importance of biodiversity for our survival and well being on this planet. Next topic: how many species are there on Earth and how many in India? Since there are published records of all the species discovered and named, we know how many species in all have been recorded so far. But it is not easy to answer the question of how many species there are on Earth. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN 2004, the total number of plant and animal species described so far is slightly more than 1.5 million, but we have no clear idea of how many species are yet to be discovered and described. Estimates vary widely, and many of them are only educated guesses. For many taxonomic groups, species inventories are more complete in temperate than in tropical countries. Considering that an overwhelmingly large proportion of the species waiting to be discovered are in the tropics, biologists make a statistical comparison of the temperate tropical species richness of an exhaustively studied group of insects and extrapolate this ratio to other groups of animals and plants to come up with a gross estimate of the total number of species on Earth. Some extreme estimates range from 20 to 50 million, but a major conservative and scientifically sound estimate made by Robert May places the global species diversity at about 7 million. Let us look at some interesting aspects about Earth's biodiversity based on the currently available species inventories. More than 70% of the species recorded are animals, while plants includes algae, fungi, bryophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms comprise no more than 22% of the total. Among animals, insects are the most species rich taxonomic group, making up more than 70% of the total. That means out of every 10 animals on this planet, 7 are insects. Again, how do we explain the enormous diversification of the insects? The number of fungi species in the world is more than the combined total of the species of fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. In figure 13.1, diversity is depicted showing species number of major taxa. It should be noted that these estimates do not give any figures for prokaryotes. Biologists are not sure about how many prokaryotic species there might be. The problem is that conventional taxonomic methods are not suitable for identifying microbial species, and many species are simply not culturable under laboratory conditions. If we accept biochemical or molecular criteria for delineating the species for this group, then their diversity along might run into millions. Although India has only 2.5% of the world's land area, its share of the global species diversity is an impressive 8.1%. That is what makes our country one of the 12 mega diversity countries of the world. Nearly 45,000 species of plants and twice as many animals have been recorded from India. How many living species are actually there waiting to be discovered and named? If we accept May's global estimates, only 22% of the total species have been recorded so far. Applying this proportion to India's diversity figures, we estimate that there are probably more than 1 lakh plant species and more than 3 lakh animal species yet to be discovered and described. Would we ever be able to complete the inventory of the biological wealth of our country? Consider the immense trained manpower, taxonomists, and the time required to complete the job. The situation appears more hopeless when we realize that a large fraction of these species faces the threat of becoming extinct even before we discover them. Nature's biological library is burning even before we catalog the titles of the books stocked there. Next, patterns of biodiversity. So first one is latitudinal gradients. The diversity of plants and animals is not uniform throughout the world, but shows a rather uneven distribution. For many group of animals or plants, there are interesting patterns in diversity, the most well known being the latitudinal gradient in diversity. In general, species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the poles. With very few exceptions, tropics, in which latitudinal range of 23.5 degree north and 23.5 degree south harbor more species than temperate or polar areas. Colombia, located near the equator, has nearly 1400 species of birds, while New York at 41 degree north has 105 species, and Greenland at 71 degree north only 56 species. India, with much of its land area in the tropical latitudes, has more than 1200 species of birds. A forest in a tropical region like Ecuador has up to 10 times as many species of vascular plants as a forest of equal area in a temperate region like the Midwest of the USA. The largely tropical Amazonian rainforest in South America has the greatest biodiversity on Earth. It is home to more than 40,000 species of plants, 3,000 of fishes, 1,300 of birds, 427 of mammals, 427 of amphibians, 378 of reptiles, and of more than 125,000 invertebrates. Scientists estimate that in these rainforests there might be at least 2 million insect species waiting to be discovered and named. What is so special about tropics that might account for their greater biological diversity? Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have proposed various hypotheses. Some important ones are speciation is generally a function of time. Unlike temperate regions subject to frequent glaciations in the past, tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. Tropical environments, unlike temperate ones, are less seasonal, relatively more constant and predictable. Thus, constant environments promote niche specialization and lead to a greater species diversity. And there is more solar energy available in the tropics, which contribute to higher productivity. This in turn might contribute indirectly to greater diversity. Species area relationships. During his pioneering and extensive explorations in the wilderness of South American jungles, the greater German naturalist and geographer Alexander von Humboldt observed that within a region, species richness increased with increasing explored area, but only up to a limit. In fact, the relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa like angiosperm plants, birds, bats, freshwater fishes, turns out to be a rectangular hyperbola. On a logarithmic scale, the relationship is a straight line described by the equation log s is equals to log c plus z log a or z log a, where s is the species richness, a is the area, and z is the slope of the line, which is also known as regression coefficient, and c is the y-intercept. Ecologists have discovered that the value of z lies in the range of 0.1 to 0.2, regardless of the taxonomic group or the region, which whether it is the plant in Britain, birds in California, or mollusk in New York State. The slopes of the regression line are amazingly similar. But if you analyze the species area relationships among very large areas like the entire continents, you will find that the slope of the line to be much steeper, z values or z values in the range of 0.6 to 1.2. For example, for frugivorous or the fruit-eating birds and mammals in the tropical forest of different continents, the slope is found to be 1.15. What do steeper slopes mean in this context? Next paragraph, the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. Does the number of species in a community really matter to the functioning of the ecosystem? This is the question for which ecologists have not been able to give a definitive answer. For many decades, ecologists believe that communities with more species generally tend to be more stable than those with less species. What exactly is stability? For a biological community, a stable community should not show too much variation in productivity from year to year. It must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances, which could be natural or man made, and it must also be resistant to invasions by alien species. We don't know how these attributes are linked to species richness in a community, but David Tillman long term ecosystem experiments using outdoor plots provide some tentative answers. Tillman found that plots with more species showed less to less year to year variation in total biomass. He also showed that in his experiments, increased diversity contributed to higher productivity. Although we may not understand completely how species richness contributes to the well being of an ecosystem, we know enough to realize that rich biodiversity is not only essential for ecosystem health and imperative for the very survival of human race on this planet. At a time when we are losing species at an alarming pace, one might ask, does it really matter to us if a few species become extinct? Would Western Ghats ecosystem be less functional if one of its tree frog species is lost forever? How is our quality of life affected if we say instead of 20,000 we have only 15,000 species of ants on earth? There are no direct answers to such naive questions, but we can develop a proper perspective through an analogy, the revert popper hypothesis used by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich. In an airplane, which is resembling to an ecosystem, all parts are joined together using thousands of rivets, which are compared with the species. If every passenger traveling in it starts popping a rivet to take home, causing species to become extinct, it may not affect flight safety or proper functioning of the ecosystem initially, but as more and more rivets are removed, the plane becomes dangerously weak over a period of time. Furthermore, which rivet is removed may also be critical. Loss of rivets on the wings, which are acting as key species that derive major ecosystem functions, is obviously a more serious threat to flight safety than loss of few rivets on the seats or windows inside the plane. Next topic is loss of biodiversity. While it is doubtful if any new species are being added through speciation into the Earth's treasury of species, there is no doubt about their continuing losses. The biological wealth of our planet has been declining rapidly, and the accusing finger is clearly pointing to human activities. The colonization of tropical Pacific islands by humans is said to have led to the extinction of more than 2,000 species of native birds. The IUCN Red List in 2004 documents the extinction of 784 species, including 338 vertebrates, 359 invertebrates, and 87 plants in the last 500 years. Some examples of recent extinctions includes the dodo or Mauritius, quagga from Africa, thylacine from Australia, stellar sea cow from Russia, and three subspecies like Bali, Javan, Caspian of tiger. The last 20 years alone have witnessed the disappearance of 27 species. Careful analysis of records show that extinction across taxa are not random. Some groups like amphibians appear to be more vulnerable to extinction. Adding to the grim scenario of extinctions is the fact that more than 15,500 species worldwide are facing the threat of extinction. Presently, 12% of the bird species, 23% of the mammal species, 32% of all amphibian species, and 31% of all the gymnosperm species in the world face the threat of extinction. From a study of the history of life on Earth through fossil records, we learn that large scale loss of species like the one we are currently witnessing have also happened earlier, even before humans appeared on the scene. During the long period of more than 3 billion years since the origin and diversification of life on Earth, there were 5 episodes of mass extinction of species. How is the sixth extinction presently in progress different from the previous episodes? The difference is in the rates. The current species extinction rates are estimated to be 100 to 1000 times faster than in the pre-human times, and our activities are responsible for the faster rates. Ecologists warn that if the present trends continue, nearly half of the species on Earth will be wiped out within the next 100 years. In general, loss of biodiversity in a region may lead to decline in plant production, lowered resistance to environmental perturbations such as drought, increased variability in certain ecosystem processes such as plant productivity, water use, and pest and disease cycles. Causes of biodiversity losses. The accelerated rates of species extinctions that the world is facing now are largely due to human activities. There are four major causes. The evil quartet is the sobriquet used to describe the same. First reason is habitat loss and fragmentation. This is the most important cause driving animals and plants to extinction. The most dramatic examples of habitat loss come from tropical rainforests. Once covering more than 14% of the Earth's land surface, these rainforests are now cover no more than 6%. They are being destroyed fast. By the time you finish reading this chapter, 1000 more hectares of rainforest would have been lost. The Amazon rainforest, which is so huge that it is known as the lungs of the planet, harboring probably millions of species, is being cut and cleared. For cultivating soya beans or for conversion to grasslands for raising beef cattle. Besides total loss, the degradation of many habitats by pollution also threaten the survival of many species. When large habitats are broken up into small fragments due to various human activities, mammals and birds requiring large territories and certain animals with the migratory habits are badly affected, leading to the population decline. Over exploitation. Humans have always depended on nature for food and shelter, but when need turns into greed, it leads to over exploitation of the natural resources. Many species extinctions in the past 500 years, like that of stellar sea cow and passenger pigeon, were due to the over exploitation by humans. Presently, many marine fish populations around the world are also being harvested, endangering the continued existence of some commercially important fishes of or the species. Alien species invasions. When alien species are introduced unintentionally or deliberately for whatever purpose, some of them turn invasive and cause decline or extinction of indigenous species. The Nile perch, introduced into Lake Victoria in East Africa, led eventually to the extinction of ecologically unique assemblage of more than 200 species of cichlid fish in the lake. You may be familiar with the environmental damage caused and threat posed to our native species by invasive weed species like carrot grass, parthenium, lantana, and water hyacinth, which is known as ecornia. The recent illegal introduction of the African catfish, Clarias gariepinus, for aquaculture purposes is posing a threat to the indigenous catfishes in our rivers. Coextinctions. When a species becomes extinct, the plant and animal species associated with it in an obligatory way also become extinct. extinct. When a horsefish species becomes extinct, its unique assemblage of parasites also meets the same fate. Another example is the case of a co evolved plant pollinator mutualism, where extinction of one invariably leads to the extinction of another. Biodiversity conservation. There are many reasons, some obvious and others not so obvious, but all equally important. There can be grouped into three categories: narrowingly utilitarian, broadly utilitarian, and ethical. The narrowly utilitarian arguments for conserving the biodiversity are obvious. Humans derive countless direct economic benefits from the nature food like cereals, pulses, fruits, firewood, fiber, construction material, industrial products, which includes tannins, lubricants, dyes, resins, perfumes, and products of medicinal importance. More than 25% of the drugs currently sold in the market worldwide are derived from the plants, and 25,000 species of plants and animals to the traditional medicines used by native people around the world. Nobody knows how many more medicinally used plants there are in tropical rainforests waiting to be explored. With increased resources put into bioprospecting, exploring molecular, genetic, and species level diversity or products of economic importance, nations endowed with rich biodiversity can expect to reap enormous benefits. Next is the broadly utilitarian argument says that biodiversity plays a major role in any ecosystem services that nature provides. The fast dwindling Amazon forest is estimated to produce through photosynthesis 20% of the total oxygen in the earth's surface. Can we put an economic value on its surface by nature? You can get some idea by finding out how much your neighborhood hospital spends on a cylinder of oxygen. Pollination is another service ecosystem provides through pollinators like bees, bumblebees, birds, bats, etc. What will be the cost of accomplishing pollination without help of natural pollinators? There are other intangible benefits that we derive from nature, the aesthetic pleasures of walking through thick woods, watching spring flowers in full bloom, or waking up to a bulbul song in the morning. Can we put a price tag on such things? The ethical argument for conserving biodiversity relates to what we owe to millions of plants, animals, and microbe species with whom we share this planet. Philosophically or spiritually, we need to realize that every species has an intrinsic value, even if may not be of current or any economic value to us. We have a moral duty to care for their well being and pass on our biological legacy in good order to our future generations. Next, in the last part of this chapter, how do we conserve biodiversity? When we conserve and protect the whole ecosystem, its biodiversity at all the levels is protected. We save the entire forest to save the tiger. This approach is called in situ or on site conservation. However, when there are situations where an animal or plant is endangered or threatened, organisms facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild in the near future and leads urgent measures to save it from extinction, ex situ or off site conservation is the desirable approach. In situ conservation. Faced with the conflict between development and conservation, many nations find it unrealistic and economically not feasible to conserve all their biological wealth. Invariably, the number of species waiting to be saved from extinction far exceeds the conservation resources available. On a global basis, this problem has been addressed by eminent conservationists. They identified four maximum protection certain biodiversity hotspots, regions with very high levels of species richness and high degree of endemism. Initially, 25 biodiversity hotspots were identified, but subsequently 9 more have been added to the list, bringing the total number of biodiversity hotspots in the world to 34. These hotspots are also regions of accelerated habitat loss. Three of these hotspots, which includes Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma and Himalaya, cover our country's exceptionally high biodiversity regions. Although all the biodiversity hotspots put together cover less than 2% of the Earth's land area, the number of species they collectively harbor is extremely high, and strict protection of these hotspots could increase the ongoing mass extinction by almost 30%. In India, ecologically unique and biodiversity rich regions are legally protected as biosphere reserves. National parks and sanctuaries. India now has 14 biosphere reserves, 90 national parks, and 48 wildlife sanctuaries. India has also a history of religious and cultural traditions that emphasize protection of nature. In many cultures, tracts of forests were set aside, and all the trees and wildlife within were venerated and given total protection. Such sacred groves are found in Kashi and Jaintia Hills in Meghalaya, Aravalli Hills of Rajasthan, Western Ghat regions of Karnataka and Maharashtra, and the Sarguja, Chanda, and Bastar areas of MP or Madhya Pradesh. In Meghalaya, the sacred groves are the last refuges for a large number of rare and threatened plants. Last but not the least, ex situ conservation. In this approach, threatened animals and plants are taken out from their natural habitat and placed in special setting where they can be protected and given special care. Zoological parks, botanical gardens, and wildlife safari parks serve this purpose. There are many animals that have become extinct in the wild but continue to be maintained in zoological parks. In recent years, ex situ conservation has advanced beyond keeping threatened species in enclosures. Now, gametes of threatened species can be preserved in viable and fertile condition for long periods using cryopreservation techniques. Eggs can be fertilized in vitro and plants can be propagated using tissue culture methods. Seeds of different genetic strains of commercially important plants can be kept for long periods in seed banks. Biodiversity knows no political boundaries, and its conservation is therefore a collective responsibility of all the nations. The historic Convention on Biological Diversity, the Earth Summit, held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, called upon all nations to take appropriate measures for conservation of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefits. In a follow up, the World Summit on Sustainable Development held in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa, 190 countries pledged their commitment to achieve by 2010 a significant reduction in the current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional, and social levels. So, with this, I am done with the reading of chapter number 13, Biodiversity and Conservation. This was the last chapter of class 12th NCERT. In case you are interested in hearing the audio of first 12 chapters, they are already uploaded in the playlist. In case it was helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. Such type of revisions are so meaningful and helpful for your CBSE board, CUET, and NEET. Just try to find out what have you learned from this live reading of chapter number 13. Don't forget to put a comment in the chat region of this video. Stay connected. I'll be back with another concept tomorrow. Thank you.